Indeed, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he has informed us in a number of ahadith concerning the affairs of the dunya and the affairs of the akhirah, that which will cause any Muslim to be satisfied with all of the tafasil and the detail that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam has given us to live a sufficient life, to live a life that is filled with khair, a life that is filled with barakah, a life that is filled with good. And there is no doubt, ayyuha al-ikhwah, that we as believers, we are constantly worried about affairs. We are worried about the affairs of the dunya. Every day that we see, we worry and we have concerns about the affairs of the dunya. And then when the nights come upon us, we worry and we have concerns concerning what may manifest within that night. But there is a night, ayyuha al-ikhwah, that each and every one of us should be extremely concerned about. There is a night, brothers and sisters, that each and every one of us should spend our days and nights thinking over, worrying, and pondering concerning how that night will be. And that night, brothers and sisters, is the first night in the grave. أول ليلة في القبر. That is the night, brothers and sisters, that we should be concerned about. That night, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam informed us in detail concerning it. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he sat at the side of the grave facing the Qibla. وَجَلَسْنَا حَوْلَهُ, and we all sat around him. وَكَانَ sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, he would attend the janaiz, but on this occasion, the grave had not yet been dug, that they were digging the grave. And so Al-Bara ibn Azib radiyallahu anhu, he said it was as though there were birds on our heads. That is, we sat that still. It was as though there were birds on our heads that we didn't want to fly away. And the grave was being dug. He said, and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he began looking at the sky. And then he would look down at the ground. And then he looked at the sky. And he looked down at the ground, and he raised his head and lowered it 3 times. He said that you should seek refuge in Allah Azza wa Jal from the punishment of the grave, and he said it twice or thrice. And then the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, when the believer is leaving the dunya and heading towards or entering the akhirah, entering the hereafter, he said angels come down upon him. And it is as though these angels have the sun in their faces. Their faces are bright and illuminated. He said each and every one of them, they have the shroud. They possess with them a shroud. And some versions mention a shroud from the shrouds of Jannah. He said, فَجَلَسُوا مِنْهُ مَدَّ الْبَصَرِ. And so then they sit behind him and behind his head as far as the eye can see. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, ثُمَّ يَجِيءُ مَلَكُ الْمَوْتِ. He said, then the angel of death comes until he removes the soul. And some versions mention detail in relation to the removing of the soul, that it leaves the body as water leaves a watering skin. He said that when the soul, it leaves, صلى عليه كل ملك بين السماء والأرض وكل ملك في السماء. He said when his soul leaves, then indeed every angel that is between the heavens and the earth, they make dua, they supplicate for him. And every angel in the heavens supplicates for him. وَفُتِحَتْ لَهُ أَبْوَابُ السَّمَاءِ, and the doors of the heavens are open for him. وَلَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِ بَابٍ إِلَّا وَهُمْ يَدْعُونَ اللَّهِ. He said, and there is no custodian of any of the doors of the heavens except that they supplicate to Allah Azza wa Jal, yani for that soul. He mentions, أن يعرج بروحه من قبلهم فإذا عرج بروحه قالوا ربي عبدك فلان. He said that all of them supplicate to Allah Azza wa Jal that that soul may come in his direction. And when the soul reaches to that angel, he says, oh my Lord, your servant Fulan, your servant such and such. He mentions, فَيَقُولُ أَرْجِعُوهُ, that they say, return him. فَإِنِّي أَحِدْتُ إِلَيْهِمْ أَنِّي مِنْهَا خَلَقَهُمْ وَفِيهَا أُعِيدُهُمْ وَمِنْهَا أُخْرِجُهُمْ تَارَةً أُخْرَى. He says, and in some versions, when it reaches the seventh heaven, and after the soul is inscribed in the register, Illiyin, the register for the righteous, that Allah Azza wa Jal says, return him to it. For indeed, I have laid down a decree that from it I have created them. That is from the turab and from the earth. From it I have created them. And indeed, فِيهَا أُعِيدُهُمْ, and to it I shall return them. وَمِنْهَا أُخْرِجُهُمْ تَارَةً أُخْرَى, and from it I shall resurrect them on a further occasion. قال فإنه يسمع خفق نعال أصحابه, and then he hears the stepping of the shoes and the sandals of his companions. He said, and when they turn away from him, then an angel comes to him. Here he mentions atin, yani an individual comes to him. And of course in other riwayat, it mentions an angel, or they mention that an angel comes to him and asks him, who is his Lord? Who is your Lord? What was your deen? And who was your prophet? فيقول ربي الله وديني الإسلام ونبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. He said that he will say, my Lord is Allah, my deen is Islam, and my messenger or my prophet was Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And so some riwayat mentioned that he will repeat that, and the servant, he shall repeat it. And then the messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and listen ikhwan to this statement, the messenger sallallahu alayhi, he said, and that is the last fitnah, that is the last fitnah that the mu'min will be exposed to. That is the last trial that the mu'min will be exposed to. No doubt, as it relates to the dunya, as it relates to the dunya as we know it. That is the last trial that the mu'min will be exposed to. Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, فَذَلِكَ حِينَ يَقُولُ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ يُثَبِّتُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِالْقَوْلِ الثَّابِتِ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ. That is when Allah Azza wa Jal, and that is the meaning of the statement of Allah, that Allah Azza wa Jal will make the believer and those who believe firm or give them the firm statement in the life of this world and in the akhirah. Another individual will come to him with a beautiful face and with a good fragrance, adorning a beautiful garment. And so he will say, give glad tidings with nobility from Allah, wa na'imin muqim, and an everlasting existence, an everlasting life. فيقول وأنت بشرك الله بخير من أنت. And he will say, and you, may Allah give you the glad tidings of good. Who are you? And so he will say, and indeed, I am your righteous actions. For indeed, you used to be, wallahi, quick. Listen again to what he says to him. You used to be, by Allah, quick to the obedience of Allah, slow and hesitant to commit sin. He said that indeed a door then will be opened to him to Jannah and a door to the hellfire. And it will be said to him, this would have been your abode had you disobeyed Allah. He mentioned, أَبْدَرَكَ اللَّهُ بِهِ هَذَا. And Allah Azza wa Jal exchanged this. He said that indeed he will say, and it will be said to him, or he will say, O my Lord, hasten the establishment of the hour, that I may return to my family and to my possessions. And it will be said to him, be tranquil. Yani, have composure and tranquility in this abode until that time. This, brothers and sisters, is what the Messenger ﷺ informed us concerning the first night of the believer in the qabr. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, while he was sitting in that same place, he said, La. He said, but as for the kafir, when he is leaving the dunya, entering the akhirah, then there comes down upon him malaika, angels that he described as being harsh and terrible, terrifying. He said, and they remove his soul. Yani they strip his soul and rip his soul from him, just as a skewer that has many prongs is pulled through wet wool. He mentions, وَتُنْزَعُ نَفْسُهُ مِنَ الْعُرُوقِ, and his body is ripped of its veins. He said, فَيَلْعَنُهُ كُلُّ مَلَكٍ بَيْنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَكُلُّ مَلَكٍ فِي السَّمَاءِ. He said, and every angel that is between the heavens and the earth curses him. And every angel that is in the heavens curses him. He mentions, وَتُغْلَقُ أَبْوَابُ السَّمَاءِ, and the doors of the heavens are closed. وَلَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِ بَابٍ إِلَّا وَهُمْ يَدْعُونَ اللَّهِ أَنْ لَا تَعْرُجَ رُوحُهُ مِنْ قِبَلِهِمْ. And there is no custodian of any of the doors of Jannah, except from the angels, except that he makes dua and supplicates to Allah Azza wa Jal, do not make that soul come to my direction. Don't let him approach from my direction. And so he will not be allowed into the heavens, and it will be said, return him. For indeed I have laid down a decree that from it I have created them, and to it I shall return them. and then I shall raise them from it on a further occasion. قال فإنه ليسمع خفق نعال أصحابه إذا ولوا عنه, and then he will hear the treading of the sandals of his companions as they turn away from him. He said, فَيَأْتِيهِ آتٍ فَيَقُولُ مَنْ رَبُّكَ مَا دِينُكَ مَنْ نَبِيُّكَ فَيَقُولُ لَا أَدْرِي. And so that angel will come to him saying, who is your Lord? What was your religion? And who was your prophet? And he will say, I don't know. And one version mentions that he will say, la adri, I don't know. فَيَقُولُ لَا دَرَيْتَ وَلَا تَلَيْتَ. He will say, you don't know and you did not read. He said, فَيَأْتِيهِ آتٍ قَبِيحُ الْوَجْهِ قَبِيحُ الثِّيَابِ مُنْتِنُ الرِّيحِ. He said, and then an individual will come to him having a horrid face, a horrific smell, and horrible clothes. And he will say, أَبْشِرْ بِهَوَانٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ. Give glad tidings of humiliation from Allah. وَعَذَابٌ مُقِيمٌ. And a lasting punishment. فَيَقُولُ وَأَنْتَ فَبَشَّرَكَ اللَّهُ بِالشَّرِّ مَنْ أَنْتَ. He said, and you, may Allah give you the tidings of evil. Who are you? And so he will say, أَنَا عَمَلُكَ الْخَبِيثِ. I am your evil actions. He said, I am your evil actions. Certainly, you were slow in following obedience to Allah, hasty and quick to race towards disobeying Allah. And so may Allah reward you today with evil. He said, ثُمَّ يُقَيِّدُ لَهُ أَعْمَى أَصَمْ أَبْكَمْ فِي يَدِهِ مِرْزَبًا. Then he will have an individual that will come to him who will be deaf, dumb, and blind. A horrid, horrific individual from the malaika of Allah Azza wa Jal, having a horrid appearance, who will be deaf, dumb, and blind. And he will have with him a large iron rod. He said, لَوْ ضُرِبَ بِهِ جَبَلٌ كَانَ تُرَابًا. If a mountain was struck with it, it would turn to dust and to dirt. فَيَضْرِبُهُ ضَرْبَةً حَتَّى يَسِيرُ تُرَابًا. And so he will strike him with it, a strike that will cause him to turn to dirt. ثُمَّ يُعِيدُهُ اللَّهُ. Then Allah Azza wa Jal shall reinstate him, shall recreate him, bring him back. فَيَضْرِبُهُ ضَرْبًا يعني ضربة أخرى فيصيح صيحة يسمعه كل شيء إلا الثقلين. And so he'll let out a yell and a scream that every individual will hear other than mankind and the jinn. قال براء بن عازب ثم يفتح له بابا من النار ويمهد من فرش النار. And then a door to the hellfire will be opened to him, and a bed of fire will be prepared for him. And the hadith was declared sahih by Sheikh Nasiruddin al-Albani in Sahih or in Ahkam al-Janaiz. Ayyuha al-ikhwa, this first night from the nights of the believer and the disbeliever is a night, brothers and sisters, that we prepare for, that we fear for every individual for. The Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam warned us and commanded us to prepare, as occurs in the hadith of Abi Hurairah radiyallahu anhu in Sahih Muslim. بادروا بالأعمال ستا الدجال والدخان ودابة الأرض وطلوع الشمس من مغربها وأمر العامة وخويسة أحدكم. He said, hasten with the performance of good deeds before 6. He said the Dajjal and the dukhan, the smoke, and the beast that will appear on the earth, and the rising of the sun from the west. And then he mentioned wal amr al-amma, the general affair, which is a reference to Yawm al-Qiyamah. He said wa khuwaysata ahadikum, and the specific affair of each and every one of you. And as the people of knowledge mentioned, that is a reference to maut, a reference to death. Khuwaysata ahadikum. And indeed the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that indeed لو نجا أحد من ضمة القبر لنجا منها سعد ibn Mu'adh. He said that indeed if any one of you was going to be safe from the squeezing of the grave, the initial squeezing that will occur, then it would have been Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. وَلَقَدْ دُمَّ ثُمَّ رُوخَ عَنْ. He was squeezed and then it was released from him. And the Messenger said the same thing about a young boy, a young child that was buried. He mentioned if anyone was going to be saved from that, it would have been this sabi, this young child. Ayyuhal ikhwa, this is what is to come. Prepare for this. For indeed, ikhwan, the affair is qareeb, the affair is close. Many of you are now seeing grey hairs manifest upon their beard. Take that as an ibrah. As the Prophet ﷺ, and as occurs in the statement of many of the Salaf, that the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, that indeed قَدْ جَاءَكُمُ النَّذِيرُ, that indeed Allah Azza wa Jal mentions that the nadhir, the warner, has already come to you. And that is a reference, as some of the Salaf they mention, to grey hair. When you see the manifestation of one grey hair, that is a warner, ikhwan, of the fact that the affair is close. Prepare, ayyuhal ikhwa, prepare for that first night, for it is a night that will not be easy for many. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad.